There is something that almost no one notices. The more you talk, the more power you lose. And the most dangerous part is that this happens silently. Maybe you've already felt this. You talk too much in a conversation. Explain something that didn't even need explaining. Justify yourself. Try to prove your point. And afterward, there's that discomfort, that feeling that you gave away more than you should have, that you said more than necessary. And deep down, you know. You didn't need to say all that. Today, we're going to explore 7 Stoic rules that can completely transform your life, learning to live with more silence, more control, and more inner power. But first, let me ask you a question. Have you ever noticed that the more you talk about something important, the harder it becomes to accomplish it? There is a deep reason for that. And it's not just philosophy, it's about human nature. The Stoics understood something that most people ignore today. Your mouth can be your greatest ally or your greatest enemy. Epictetus said something simple, but brutally true. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. But almost no one lives like that. We live in a world where everyone wants to talk, few want to listen, and almost no one knows how to stay silent. And that's exactly why so many people live, emotionally exhausted, mentally confused, spiritually disconnected, because talking too much isn't just a habit, it's a symptom of anxiety, of insecurity, of the need for approval. And here's where something deep comes in. Stoicism explains the mind, but Christian faith reveals the purpose behind it. In the book of Proverbs it is written, "Whoever guards his mouth preserves his soul." Do you see that? It's not just about behavior, it's about spiritual protection. Every unnecessary word exposes you. Every impulsive reaction weakens you. Every excessive explanation takes away a piece of your peace. But there is a different path, a silent path, a path where you don't have to prove anything, where you don't have to convince anyone, where you simply live. And that's exactly what these 7 rules will teach you. The first thing you need to understand is simple, but hard to accept. Not everything needs to be said. The second thing, not every thought deserves to become a word. And the third, not every situation requires a response. But here's the point that almost no one notices. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence. It's in silence that you observe better, understand more, react less, and grow internally. But there was something you still hadn't realized. Silence is not just a mental tool, it is also a spiritual practice. Jesus in many moments chose silence. In the face of accusations, in the face of injustices, in the face of provocation, he did not react. Because someone who knows who they are doesn't need to explain themselves all the time. And this is one of the greatest freedoms you can experience. When you stop talking to defend yourself and start living with integrity, but most people do the opposite. They talk to fill the void, talk to relieve anxiety, talk to appear important, and without realizing it, they sabotage themselves. Because every excess word reveals weakness before strength matures, exposes plans before the right time creates unnecessary conflict, and little by little, life starts to feel heavier, noisier, more chaotic. But true transformation begins when you do the opposite. When you learn to talk less, listen more, observe better, and most importantly, when you learn to be at peace in silence. But there is a story, a simple story, but one that reveals all of this much more deeply. And it was in this moment that everything began to change. Daniel had always been the type of person who needed to explain everything. If someone misunderstood him, he corrected them. If someone disagreed, he argued. If he felt misunderstood, he went back, insisted, detailed. And at first, this seemed like a virtue. He saw himself as clear, rational, fair. But there was something he hadn't realized yet. The more he talked, the more drained he became. It all became evident in a simple moment. A conversation, nothing major, a misunderstood comment at work. A colleague misunderstood something Daniel said and reacted coldly. Anyone else might have let it go, but not Daniel. He felt that immediate need to explain, to correct, to set things straight. So he began. Sent long messages, explained the context, detailed his intentions, reinforced that he didn't mean that. And for a few minutes, it seemed resolved, but it wasn't. The next day, the atmosphere was strange, heavier than before, and that's when something began to bother him deeply. Why did this get worse? If I was just trying to clarify. But that wasn't an isolated case, it was a pattern. In relationships, in friendships, in family, Daniel was always over-explaining, reacting too quickly, speaking more than necessary, and little by little, people started to pull away, not because of what he said, but because of the energy that came with it, an energy of tension, of the need for control, of someone who never simply let things pass. And it was in that moment that everything began to change. One night, after another argument, this time with someone he truly loved, he was alone. Silence, no messages, no replies, no one to convince, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't speak. He just stayed there, sitting, thinking. And something began to emerge, an uncomfortable question. What if the problem isn't others, but there was something even deeper? He began to remember all the times he spoke when he should have listened, reacted when he could have waited, explained when silence would have been enough, and for the first time, he didn't try to defend himself even in his own mind. He simply observed, and it was in that space that the truth appeared. It wasn't about being right. It was about needing to be right. It wasn't about explaining himself. It was about not being able to tolerate being misunderstood. It wasn't about justice. It was about ego. And that realization hurt, but at the same time, freed him. In the following days, Daniel decided to test something. Nothing radical, nothing extreme, just strategic silence. At the first opportunity, someone made a comment he would normally correct immediately, but this time, he didn't respond right away. He breathed, observed, and stayed silent for a few extra seconds, and something curious happened. The other person kept talking, and by continuing, they corrected themselves, without effort, without conflict, without strain. That was strange, but also revealing. So he began to apply this more often. When he felt like explaining, he waited. When he felt like reacting, he breathed. When he felt like proving something, he stayed silent. And little by little, something began to change within him. Less anxiety, less need for control, fewer conflicts, but the real transformation was still to come. One day, someone said something unfair about him. Something that, before, would have triggered an immediate reaction. But this time, he just listened, didn't interrupt, didn't correct, didn't defend himself, and walked away, without saying anything. In that moment, it seemed like he had lost, but he hadn't, because that night, he slept in peace. No mental replay, no imaginary arguments. No need to have said something better. And that's when he understood silence is not weakness, it is freedom. Freedom not to react, freedom not to justify yourself, freedom not to live trapped by other people's opinions, and more than that, he realized something even deeper. The less he spoke, the more people began to listen when he actually said something. His words gained weight, presence, intention. But there was something even greater happening. He began to listen to himself, something he hadn't done in years, without constant noise, without the need to respond all the time. He began to notice what he truly felt, what truly mattered, what truly needed to change. And it was in that silence that he found something he had always searched for outside, peace. But the real lesson was still to come, because Daniel still didn't fully understand what was happening within him. He was experiencing the effects, but he didn't yet know the root. And that's exactly what we're going to explore now. What happened to Daniel wasn't coincidence. It was principle. It was alignment. And here is the point that changes everything. Stoicism explains why silence brings mental clarity. But Christian faith reveals why silence also brings spiritual alignment. Daniel thought he was just talking too much. But in reality, he was trying to control what he couldn't. Other people's opinions, other people's interpretations, the image others had of him. And that is an impossible battle. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that crossed centuries. You have power over your mind, not over external events. Now think about this carefully. Every time you over-explain, you are trying to control something external. Every time you react impulsively, you are handing your peace to someone else. Every time you feel the need to prove something, you are negotiating your worth. But there was something even deeper. Silence doesn't just protect your mind. It protects your soul. In Christian faith, there is a powerful principle. God works in the unseen. While the world values noise, God acts in secrecy. In the Gospel of Matthew, it is written, "And your Father who sees in secret will reward you." Do you see the connection? The Stoic learns to be silent to master the mind. The Christian learns to be silent to trust God. And when these two meet, you don't just control yourself, you align yourself. But most people live disconnected from this. They believe they need to respond to everything, need to defend themselves all the time, need to be understood by everyone. And this creates exhaustion, because living this way is living in a constant state of reaction. And a reactive mind is never at peace. Seneca said, "The more you engage in arguments, the more you lose yourself." And this is not just philosophical, it is psychological. Every impulsive reaction reinforces a mental pattern. Every unnecessary argument strengthens the ego. Every word spoken in the heat of the moment pulls you away from your essence. But here's the turning point. Silence breaks this cycle. When you don't react, you interrupt the pattern. When you don't explain yourself, you cut the need for approval. When you don't speak, you begin to hear something much more important, your conscience. And this is where faith enters even more deeply. Because in silence, you don't just hear yourself, you learn to hear God. There is a huge difference between talking all the time and being in communion. True prayer is not just speaking, it is also listening. But how can someone listen if they live in constant internal noise, if the mind never stops? If the heart is always trying to prove something, silence then becomes a meeting place, a place where the ego diminishes, anxiety slows down, God's presence becomes perceptible. But there was something most people ignore. Silence also reveals. It reveals what you avoid. Reveals your insecurities, your fears, your attachments. That's why so many people run from it, because in silence, there is no distraction, no applause, no external validation, only you and the truth. And that can be uncomfortable, but also liberating. Epictetus taught, "First say to yourself who you want to be, then act accordingly." But how can you know who you want to be if you never stop to listen, if you are always reacting, always talking, always explaining yourself? Silence creates this space, a space where you stop living on autopilot and begin to live with intention. And here comes something practical. 3 actions that can transform your life starting today. First action, silence before reaction. before responding to anything. Wait. Breathe. Give it a few seconds. That alone changes everything. Second action. Silence about what is still growing. Not every plan needs to be shared. Not every dream needs to be exposed. Protect what is still fragile. Third action. Silence in the face of what doesn't deserve your energy. Not every criticism needs a response. Not every opinion deserves attention. Not every provocation requires a reaction. But real transformation is not just in understanding this, it is in living it. Because knowledge without practice is just intellectual noise. And maybe now you're realizing something. Maybe you've spoken too much in important moments. Maybe you explained yourself when you should have trusted. Maybe you reacted when silence would have been more powerful. And that's okay. It's part of the process. But from here on, you have a choice to keep living on impulse or to start living with intention. But the transformation is still not complete, because understanding silence is just the beginning. Now you need to learn how to live with it. Now everything comes down to a simple choice, but extremely difficult to live. Will you keep reacting the way you always have? Or will you begin to live with mastery? Because understanding silence is one thing, but practicing silence is something completely different. And this is where most people fail. Because in the real moment, in the difficult conversation, in the unexpected criticism, in the provocation, the impulse comes, and it comes strong. The urge to respond, to defend yourself, to explain, to prove. But it is exactly in that moment that your transformation happens, or not. Maybe you're already realizing this now. The problem was never the world around you. It was the way you reacted to it, and that changes everything. Because if the problem is in the reaction, the solution is in control, and control begins in silence. But let me guide you through something deeper now. Close your mind for a moment to external noise and observe. How many times did you speak when you should have stayed silent? How many times did you try to explain something and only made the situation worse? How many times did you enter discussions that deep down led nowhere? Now go deeper. How many times did you lose your peace because of words you said, words said to you, words that kept echoing in your mind? And here is the truth that few accept. A single word can destroy a moment, but the right silence can save an entire life. This is not weakness, this is power. And if you truly want to live this, I want to propose a simple challenge, but a transformative one. For the next 7 days, practice this consciously. First, before responding to anything emotional, wait 5 seconds. That's it. 5 seconds of silence. It seems small, but it changes everything. Second, avoid sharing something important in your life. A plan, an idea, a goal. Keep it, protect it, let it grow in silence. Third, when you feel the urge to justify yourself, don't do it. Just keep living with integrity. Let time answer for you. And you will notice something. Your mind will become lighter, your relationships simpler, your life more silent, but stronger, because there is a peace that only those who learn to be silent know. And that peace does not depend on anyone's opinion, does not depend on validation, does not depend on applause. It comes from within. It comes from alignment. And above all, it comes from God. In Psalm 46 it is written, "Be still and know that I am God." Do you see that? Be still. Before knowing, before understanding, before controlling, comes silence, because it is in silence that you trust, that you rest, that you align yourself. But let me ask you one last question, an honest question. If you kept living exactly as you are today, talking the same amount, reacting the same way, explaining yourself the same way, Where will that lead you? More peace or more exhaustion? More clarity or more confusion? Now imagine the opposite. A life where you don't need to prove anything, you don't react to everything, you choose when to speak, and most importantly, when to stay silent. That is not isolation. That is maturity. That is mastery. That is freedom. And maybe that is exactly what is missing in your life today. If this message made sense to you, I want to hear from you. Which of these rules do you feel you most need to apply in your life? And more importantly, what recent situation do you realize would have been better in silence? Write it here in the comments. I read them. And it also helps others reflect. And if you feel that this kind of content strengthens you, subscribe to the channel. Here we explore together Stoicism, faith, emotional discipline, and purpose without noise, without exaggeration, only truth. And remember, Stoicism teaches you to control the mind. Faith teaches you to trust the path. But it is in silence that the two meet. And before you leave, think about this for a moment. How many battles in your life were created just by words that never needed to be said? How many times would silence have protected you, saved you, given you peace? Maybe what you're searching for isn't more answers. Maybe it's less noise. If this video spoke to you in any way, leave a like comment below. I choose silence. And turn on notifications to keep learning how to live with more clarity, faith, and emotional mastery. This helps this message reach people who truly need it. And at the end of this video, there's another video waiting for you. If you want to continue this path of transformation, just click. I'll see you there.